startup video of Watson Marlow 30 series pumps. First thing, we'll make sure that we've got this set up so it's a brand new pump, so we'll restore defaults and go back to the normal menu. So once you flip the pump on, you'll choose your language. So we'll choose English, confirm. First thing we want to do is we're going to go into the general settings tabs. Auto restart's only going to be used if you're using manual mode. At that time is the only time that you will select auto restart. So the first thing we'll do is we'll select our flow units. We're going to select gallons per hour. The next thing we want to do is make sure that our pump head matches what we're actually going to be using for the tube, which makes calibration a lot easier. So on here, we'll continue to use the 520 R2 because that's what would be found inside the case. Our bore size is where the most important part is, and if you take a brand new bag, you'll see that right here where it tells us our 3.2 or so on is where our bore size will be found. So there we'll want to select and make sure that it says 3.2. The 2.4 millimeter on the first portion is the wall size. All wall sizes are the same no matter what you're using. So we'll select 3.2 millimeter for bore size. After that, we will go back and we're going to go back one more time. We're going to go into control settings. In our control settings, we're mainly concerned about is our configure outputs. You have 4 outputs to choose from. Those are going to be those 4 relays in the back that are wired in. And underneath there, you're going to find the options that we've got for the main one that I would suggest people to use is the leak detected if they've got a leak detection attached to this. So set up on that, we hit select. The high and low is basically the exact same as normally open or normally closed. On most situations I've seen that high is selected. If you're always getting an alarm, then you would go ahead and just go back into this feature and select low to make sure that it would operate properly. So for this, we'll just select high. We'll assume that there was only one input on a relay and move on. After those are set up, we're going to go into our mode menu and we're going to go to analog and calibrate it. We want the analog input and we will be dealing with 4 to 20 milliamps, so select on there. On this right now, what you're seeing is the manual or input. Manual is as it seems is I can manually select what my milliamp values will be. Input is the more appropriate way to do it, where they would be sending you a signal from SCADA. If you put SCADA into manual, you can use 0 to 100%, 4 milliamps being 0 and 20 milliamps being 100%. When they send the signal, you would select enter. So that way if they've got a milliamp above 4, you could set that as your 0. But at this time we'll be using manual. So right now is what you're seeing is they want the high value. Unfortunately, Watson Marlow has not corrected this problem, so 19.8 milliamps is what comes from factory. So we're going to want to bump this up to 20 milliamps just by hitting the up arrow key. At that time we'll select enter. I'll show you a shortcut to figure out the flow percentages, but for now we're going to leave it at 100%. The next one, this is where all of the problems have been coming in with the red screen of death because from factory they come at 5 milliamps. So that needs to be brought down to 4 milliamps. So all the issues that Jeff and everyone else were having were due to this portion not being calibrated properly. So once we select that 4 milliamps, we can go ahead and hit accept. At this point, we will want the 0 flow because 4 milliamps is our 0 percentage. And at this time, if you had the wires and everything hooked up, you could go ahead and hit analog. But we we'll go into manual and kind of go through how the settings would end up being if we were to set it up slightly different. So let's say that you weren't using full range of pump and you were going to limit it to, let's say 5 gallons per hour, for instance. So we would hit the up arrow when we're in menu, or in the manual mode, select 5 gallons per hour. So this would be setting up basically the parts per million feed rate that you would figure out, and then you can set it up so that would be linear. So let's just say that the engineer said that they wanted it to be 5 gallons per hour based upon the flow meter and everything else. So at this point, if we hit the info key, and you'll see that we got 187.8 RPM. So at that point, we would just do the math. This pump is a 220 RPM pump, and at 5 gallons per hour was 179.2 RPM. So we take 179.2 divided by the 220 RPM multiplied by 100 to figure out our percent. So then it comes out to 81.45%. And why this was important, because if you remember when we were in our analog and we had that manual option at 20 milliamps, and there's our percentage. So to figure out the percentage is basically knowing what your RPM was at whatever set point you had divided by the 220 multiplied by 100 to give us a percent. So now we could go ahead and put in our 81.45%. And of course, we're going to have to round up because we're only given one decimal place, but we would just put it as 81.5, set flow. So now if we think about it as an analog mode at 20 milliamps, it is a 5 gallon per hour pump. So that way it could be linear with anywhere we were in there. But we just basically have to figure out how many gallon per hour you would need at your 20 milliamp setting, set that in under your percentage, and now it's linear with your parts per million anywhere with your flow of that plant. At this time, you would be able to select your analog, and then now you'd be operating off of SCADA. That is all. Thanks.